Hello everybody. I'm going to go ahead and talk about the chapter 3 weekly reflections. Um, so in chapter 3 of the Ada and Compe book, it talks about the importance of dialogue in the classroom. It mentions that dialogue allows the teacher to build on what students bring with them to the classroom. Through these conversations, we invite the students to share their feelings and their personal experiences, and this can be found on the very first page of chapter 3, which is page 41. I completely agree with this, especially when a teacher goes ahead and opens up and talks about their personal experience. It makes the child or the student be more engaged in the lesson or the topic being talked about at hand. So I feel like it kind of makes them somewhat connected, so it makes them be a little bit more into that lesson. It also mentions the challenges of the dialogue and how it may be difficult for educators, because we have a tendency of teaching the way that we were taught. This can be found on page 44, and I do believe this is true because most of us were taught maybe a little bit different than it is nowadays. Nowadays is a lot about the students' interactions, and even sometimes the students kind of taking over the class, so to say. And back then, at least when I was growing up, it was just the teacher standing in front of the class, and her or him having to do the lesson completely by themselves, and only asking the students, for the answers or whenever we had a question. But it was mostly the teacher, generally speaking, always talking. That's not really how it is nowadays, which is good because I prefer the student to be more involved, and I think that it makes us, like, I guess, a little closer. What else? Let me see. So in chapter 1 from the other book, from Tabor's book, the one thing that also caught my attention was the fact that researchers think that the process of learning or acquiring two languages at an early age has cognitive and social benefits. This can be found on page 12 from that chapter 1. When I was growing up, people used to always ask me how it was that I could speak English and Spanish so fluently. But it was just something that, I don't know, was installed in my brain as a little girl. Spanish, even though I was born here, Spanish was my first language just because mom and dad, that's all they spoke. Abuelo and abuela, that's all they spoke. So pretty much it's what I learned. It's when I went to school that I started learning English. And then I would talk only English with my brother, but I still, speak fluently Spanish and English. So there was always that misconception that learning both languages together would confuse a child. And that's something I've always heard, and I don't find it to be true. And even as a mother today, the first language I spoke to my kids were Spanish. But as they get into daycare and preparing for preschool, they speak English a lot more than they do Spanish. But I never, ever, ever take the Spanish away from them, because I think it's something that obviously is going to benefit them in the future, whether it be, finding the correct job and their careers, or in anything that they set their minds to do. Okay, so let me see. Also in page 11, it states that children will quickly demonstrate a capacity to keep both languages separate. And pretty much that's what I did, and so far that's what my kids are doing. And they will know when to use the appropriate languages, and that's pretty much what it is. And I believe it to be true because it's something that I do on a daily basis. So now in chapter 2 from the same book, I learned that when children from non-English speaking homes first arrive in a school setting in which only English is used, they cope with a variety of social and linguistic demands that students from an English speaking home don't have to face, or they don't have to deal with. And I do find this to be true. Well, this is found on page 23 of chapter 2. And I do find this to be very true, because I remember when my younger cousin came from Cuba about 6 years ago. She was like 9 years old, so she was a little bit older. It wasn't such an early stage, but I remember her being very shy and timid. You know, when all the cousins would reunite and, you know, start talking only in English. Thinking about it now, I felt a little bad because she wasn't understanding. But luckily, it was an early age enough that she was able to pick up the language very quickly. Now she's like 16 years old and speaks very, very fluent English. So let me see. So yeah, so luckily it was at an early age where she was able to pick it up, you know, rather quickly. Well, that's what I've learned so far. So thank you.